Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Very glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We wish we had a good martini for you today, but hope springs eternal for tomorrow. Jim, I was kind of hoping our good martini would be another squad member defeated in a primary last night, but sadly we did not get that with Ilhan Omar in Minnesota. Ilhan Omar, who Tim Walz has lauded on numerous occasions, but I guess we're just going to have to be happy with Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush not being back in Congress next year. We're still going to be stuck with Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and AOC.
Greg, I was hoping to see Omar get defeated as well. I believe it could be close. Could it be a tie? And they say, a tie is like kissing your brother. And
all right, let's talk about our first bad martini. And hey, hats off to Axios for giving us a lot of material today. First of all, we've got this one. Sarah Fisher is the media reporter over at Axios, and she dropped this little bomb on us yesterday afternoon. The Harris campaign has been editing news headlines and descriptions in search ads that make it appear as if major outlets support her. Google believes its sponsored disclosures are enough to keep voters from being misled, but media outlets may feel differently. So, when you get to the bottom of whatever article you're reading and it'll say in little letters, sponsored content, that's what the Harris campaign is apparently doing here. In the story, it says the Harris campaign has been editing news headlines and descriptions within Google search ads that make it appear as if The Guardian, Reuters, CBS News, and other major publishers are on her side. Well, they are. Why it matters. It's a common practice in the commercial advertising world that doesn't violate Google's policies, but the ads mimic real news results from search closely enough that they have news outlets caught off guard. According to Google's Transparency Center, the Trump campaign isn't running these types of ads, but this technique has been used by campaigns before. The ads say they are sponsored, but it's not immediately clear that the text that accompanies real news links is written by the campaigns and not by the media publication itself. Now, what they're saying. Quote, while we understand why an organization might wish to align itself with the Guardian's trusted brand, we need to ensure it is being used appropriately and with our permission. We'll be reaching out to Google for more information about this practice, according to a Guardian spokesman. Spokespeople for brands such as CNN, USA Today, and NPR, whose links appeared in Harris for President ads, said they were unaware their brand was being featured this way. And when the statement is so terse, it seems like they don't really care. Sarah Fisher herself later retweets, Harris camp doing nothing wrong. And Google, which is pretty strict about banning spammy ads, doesn't see it as a consumer harm. News outlets just collateral damage in this weird ads tactic. And here's how Abby Phillips brought it up on CNN last night.
According to Axios, her campaign is now sponsoring these Google search ads that are kind of controversial. The ads, they manipulate headlines in search to imply to viewers that they are more positive and that they are from news outlets. All of this part of the effort by the Harris campaign to try to reintroduce her to the voters. But this is going to be the main argument, I assume, that Republicans are going to make about her, which is that she's a flip-flopper.
Or just creating fiction that is trying to confuse people. So, Jim, I think the larger accusation is that Kamala Harris is trying to create a whole new person, which we'll talk about in the second martini. But what do you make of not only Harris doing this, but also most of the media outlets involved being like, what are you going to do?
The Axios reporter had a good scoop. And it is absolutely fascinating to watch someone say, oh, wait, it's not that big a scoop. It's not that big a deal. They did nothing wrong, to use the quote there. Yes, it is. It is misrepresentation. What are we talking about? There's nothing wrong with that. By the way, we could pause and just marvel, not just that the Kamala Harris campaign believes that the coverage hasn't been generous enough, hasn't been kind and positive enough with all the talk about coconut tree memes and the vibes, and she's brought joy back to the campaign. That's not going to, of all the places they could say aren't being friendly enough and needed to be edited to sound more friendly, The Guardian, Reuters, CBS News. Really? Was MSNBC spared? Are they tired of the all that tough, rigorous, critical coverage from Mother Jones and The Nation, The New Republic, places like that? So when I saw this, I was reminded of one of the many, many criticisms of Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11. Miami Herald, and something like recount proves Gore won the election or something like that was the headline that was there. And at the point, like, oh my God, wow, recount proved that Gore won. Bush never should have been president. This is ridiculous. And what it was that was the headline on a letter to the editor, meaning the letter writer was asserting that a recount would have shown that. By the way, of the available recounts that have been done, Bush won again. It was very narrow. I can understand it sucks when you lose by 537 votes out of, several million cast. Very close. But Bush won Florida. Oh, by the way, the network should not have called it before the polls closed. But Michael Moore used the letter headline and made it look like it was a news headline and the judgment of the Miami Herald news team and that their in-depth reporting had come to that conclusion, which had not been that. If you want to have a strong argument, you should not misrepresent anything. You should represent, like, the truth. For something you want to say is good, the truth should be good enough. If you find yourself having to change things and misrepresent things, then you're in a problem. Then that thing that you think is good is not that good. And the flip side, like whenever you hear, look, George Soros is a bad guy who has, sponsored all kinds of crazy left-wing prosecutors who don't believe in prosecuting crime, who believe in a revolving door, keep putting people back on the street, no cash bail, et cetera, et cetera. You don't really need to get into all kinds of vast conspiracy theories involving George Soros. You often hear the claim that he helped the Nazis or something like that. No, he once took inventory when he was a kid at some estate that had been seized by that. We can argue about whether that's, moral, but when you're a Jew in Central Europe in the 1930s and 40s and you're trying to not get killed, I'm going to cut somebody some slack. The point is that, of all the things George Soros has done with his life, this is what you're going to go after? The truth is bad enough. We don't need to engage in these vast conspiracy theories, right? That is, if you're Kamala Harris, the press loves her. Really, it's not a hard case to make. You really shouldn't need to change anything. You shouldn't be needing to, rearrange the wording on the headlines or something like that. So it's utterly ridiculous. Axios had a perfectly good scoop here. The Harris campaign should not be doing this. And there should not be any, cowardly retreat away from this scoop and insisting that there's nothing wrong. Yes, it is. You should not misrepresent things. We are on the first martini, Greg, and already I'm starting to sound like Will Ferrell in Zoolander saying, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills.
No, that's exactly right. And obviously, those tweets were 10 minutes apart. So, in those 10 minutes, there was some nasty blowback.
Why are you trying to help elect Trump, Sarah? Do your part. We're all in this together. You kind of want that, Starship Troopers. I'm doing my part.
Yeah, it definitely has that vibe. Unbelievable. Speaking of vibes. All right, here's the vibe you really need, though, and that is the great convenience of Lumen. If you want to get a handle on your diet and your overall health, there's no easier way to do it quickly and accurately than with Lumen, the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. You wake up, you take a deep breath, you breathe into your Lumen. It tells you if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and a whole lot more.
Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, the very best metabolic health translates into a whole bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even better sleep. Lumen gives you recommendations that can improve your metabolic health.
So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/3ml to get 15% off your Lumen. That is lumen.me/3ml for 15% off your purchase. Again, that's lumen.me/3ml. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. All right, Jim, we're not done yet with Axios. Jim Vandehei is got a piece out on Kamala Harris's strategy. Now, she's the presumptive Democratic nominee, and basically it's not a marathon election for her. It's a sprint election from mid-July all the way to the first week in November. And, she's already almost a month into it here and still hasn't done an interview or a significant press conference. But here's what he says is her problem and her plan. Harris doesn't want to be completely defined by the Biden-Harris record, advisors tell us, and she needs some distance. Why? 80% of U.S. adults in Gallup polling say they're dissatisfied with the direction of the country. She also wants, and this is just Vanda High's wording here, a clean break from Biden's often backward-looking lens on democracy and other issues. Boy, they weren't saying that a month and a half ago, were they? Harris, a California native who came up through Golden State politics, wants to carve out her own innovation agenda and will brand it with a generic look-ahead spin of win the future. A big part of the Harris plan is to unapologetically change some of her more liberal positions and claim her White House experience helped change her mind. Yes, when she was running in 2019, she was against fracking. She was for decriminalizing illegal border crossings and for single-payer health care. No more. She's backed off all three. And she's also happy to pluck popular Trump ideas, notably no tax on tips for service and hospitality workers, popular in Nevada. So she's betting that in the small 3-month window of her SNAP campaign, what people hear now is what's going to stick because she knows that most people don't know that much about her. We're told Harris wants to be seen as the change agent in the race, like we mentioned yesterday. Her emphasis on the cost of groceries is meant to signal that she can better relate to typical households than Trump. Look for her to emphasize her record as a prosecutor, including settlements she won in price-fixing cases when she was California Attorney General. In a later installment of her economic agenda, she'll present plans to help entrepreneurs and small businesses. She also says at rallies that fighting inflation will be a day-one priority, and strengthening the middle class will be a defining goal of her presidency. So, Jim, I mean, the change candidate for the one who's been literally a heartbeat away from the presidency for almost 4 years and cast more tie-breaking votes in the U.S. Senate for Biden administration policies, yet she's somehow going to try and create distance here by swinging elbows like a Shaq in the post or something. But I don't know. What do you make of this?
Every vice president who follows a president has to carve out their own identity and lay out their own agenda. You saw this with Reagan and Bush, 1,000 points of light, kindler and gentler nation. You know, apparently there's a report that, Nancy Reagan is at the convention, turns to someone and says, kindler and gentler than who? You can understand that, maybe the Reaganites were not, fond of every, inherent in every vice president's message is, I'm proud of what we've done so far, but the job isn't done. I'm going to do some things differently than the president I was vice president to. Gore and Clinton and, lockbox. My Al Gore is nowhere near as good as Greg's. But so on the one hand, it's not unheard of to do something like this. And if Harris were to go out and say, do a press conference or, sit down for a long, serious interview, preferably on camera. And she said, I love Joe. I'm proud of what we've done, but I'm going to do some things a little bit differently than we have for the last 4 years. Then do that. And if you say, back in 2019, I just didn't realize that fracking was an irreplaceable part of U.S. energy production. And you could argue about whether it'd be believable or whether it's like, no, I really need to win Pennsylvania now. That's why I support this. But you at least would like there be some explanation for her different thinking now than 4 years ago. I think the one that I found, the scenario where I find most plausible or reasonable, foreign policy, national security always looks so easy from the outside. It's all easy calls when you're just one of 100 senators or anything like that. I would just love for any, new president or in this case, a vice president to say, yeah, I really thought we could reach reasonable negotiations with all of these people. And then I got the security briefings and these guys they're psychopaths. They got a demon's resume. There's no deal to be reached with these folks. And the only language these animals understand is force. If you go through that, I'm like, okay, you have learned more. I was just talking with one of my colleagues where he said he's less supportive of drug legalization than he was a decade ago. And that was not, because the person's a flip-flopper. It's because they're based on experience. They looked at the experience of Portland and lots of other places where they decriminalized drugs. And, instead of making things better and everybody was just going to be reasonable and smoking their weed, everybody was very laid back. You've got just like masses of seriously drug-addicted, mentally unstable people rampaging through the streets. So, it's okay to say, I've learned more. There's new information that has come to light, and I've altered my opinion based on that. I don't think we're going to get that from Kamala Harris. She's never been very good at explaining these sorts of things. She's never been, going back to the 2019 campaign, she had several flip-flops on that one on Medicaid for all and several other positions. And when, she got asked about it, that's when you got the, giggling and stuff like that. So, on paper, there's nothing wrong with that. But the idea of I'm going to be the change agent, yesterday's Morning Jolt, I laid out a whole bunch of questions that Harris should be asked. And a big question is, you keep saying on day one, why can't you do that now? What is stopping you from doing that now? Does Biden not want to do it? Have you pitched this idea to Biden? Can you reach by? Is it you just can't get an appointment between 10 and 4 when he's awake? Is that the problem there? What makes if it'd be interesting to see if I wanted to do this stuff, but Biden opposed it. Well, now you got a really interesting story. Now you can actually make yourself an actual plausible case of being a change agent. But again, when you've been the vice president for the past 4 years, if Harris had any objection to any policy enacted under the Biden administration, she's been very quiet about it. And I think if you want to be the Democratic nominee, now is the time to lay it out. Color me skeptical that we'll actually get any, serious details on that.
Now, it'll be curious to see her try to fumble her way through the question, if she ever gets the question about how she changed her mind on all this stuff, and conveniently all at the same time, too, Jim. That's always fascinating. Jimmy Carter talked about his conversations with Amy about nuclear policy. Barack Obama talking about how his kids changed his opinion on the definition of marriage. So I don't know who she's going to talk to or claim help to change her mind on this stuff, but I'm sure she'll have some sort of folksy story, because folksy is one of the other adjectives we have to use all the time now. But the way Vandehei sums this up is also going to ruin your appetite for lunch. So it's not always clear what core unbendable beliefs animate her. No doubt she was a liberal in the Senate and during her failed 2019 presidential campaign. But her new persona and policy shifts suggest a repositioning to the center of the modern Democratic Party. Basically, she's a Biden Democrat, even if she hopes to downplay that in some areas. If the Biden administration's record is moderate or the center of the modern Democratic Party, that party has shifted a long way to the left. And it has in recent cycles. But this idea that she's, all these new revelations, I guess I'm back in the middle, just in time to try and win independent votes.
We're probably going to get something like, Greg, I am unburdened by what has been. Let me show you a Venn diagram. Here's my old positions. Here's my new positions. There's very little overlap in the Venn diagram there. These new positions, they just fell out of a coconut tree.
Exactly right. All right. Well, if you need to get your AI house in order, much better than the Harris campaign, by the way, go with Oracle. AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's got the potential to transform every industry, altering the way we work, live, and interact with the world. But the problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without your costs spiraling out of control? Take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/martini.
It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. OCI offers a complete range of cloud services to meet your needs, whether it's on-premises, hybrid, multi-cloud, or public. Its global network and flexible options tackle your toughest business challenges. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. And OCI offers 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds and is all at one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing. You can look to the industry leaders that rely on Oracle. We're talking companies like Zoom, Mazda, and Toyota.
Now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. Do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic. Take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/martini. That's oracle.com/martini. oracle.com/martini.
You have more wealth than your neighbor, and they don't have a clue. The Watchdog on Wall Street podcast with Chris Markowski. Every day, Chris helps unpack the connection between politics and the economy and how it affects your wallet. Don't get into this vicious cycle of trying to compete with people on social media or people you live near with material items. If you're putting money away, you can take advantage of those opportunities throughout your life. Whether it's happening in D.C. or down on Wall Street, it's affecting you financially. Be informed. Check out the Watchdog on Wall Street podcast with Chris Markowski on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, Jim, we alluded to President Biden a couple of times there in that second martini. We're going to talk a lot more about the Bidens here in our final martini, our crazy. And just like we've talked about on so many other issues, all of a sudden it's okay for the media to talk about things that were absolutely forbidden before, like after the debate. Oh, we need to talk about the fact that Joe Biden might not be up to the job. He might be slipping, the thing we called a cheap fake, like less than a week ago at the time. But now we've got a couple of stories just out in the past couple of days about Hunter Biden. And it turns out there was some influence peddling happening, Jim, or at least allegations of that, according to the special counsel. Two parts to this so far. ABC News from August 11th. Prosecutors and special counsel David Weiss's office are accusing Hunter Biden of accepting payments from a Romanian businessman who was attempting to, quote, influence U.S. government agencies, unquote, while his father Joe Biden was vice president. If true, the allegation would mark the closest prosecutors have come to tying President Joe Biden to his son's overseas business endeavors, a matter congressional Republicans have spent years scrutinizing. Yes, they have, haven't they? The special counsel's claim in a court filing Wednesday of last week in the younger Biden's federal tax case stems from Hunter Biden's work on behalf of Gabriel Popoviciu. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. A wealthy Romanian who prosecutors say hired the president's son for legal work in late 2015. At the time, Popoviciu was facing corruption charges in his home country. At Hunter Biden's upcoming tax trial, the government will introduce the evidence that Biden and business associate one received compensation from a foreign principal who was attempting to influence U.S. policy and public opinion and cause the U.S. to investigate the Romanian investigation of Popoviciu in Romania. Now, another story from the New York Post. First son Hunter Biden, acting on behalf of a Ukrainian energy company, Burisma, requested help from the U.S. Embassy in Rome to land a lucrative business deal while his father was vice president. Hunter's big ask and apparent attempt to use his father's position of power to land the deal for Burisma came to light only after State Department records were released to the New York Times after Joe Biden ended his 2024 re-election bid last month. Quote, I want to be careful about promising too much, a Commerce Department official at the U.S. Embassy in Italy wrote in response to Hunter's 2016 letter, which was not released. The official seemed alarmed by the request, noting the various protocols in place that prevent the U.S. government from lobbying on behalf of foreign companies. So, Jim, I'm sure we could bust out the Dennis Green line here. I'm sure we could castigate the media for pretending there was nothing there as long as there was political damage potentially to Joe Biden. Now that that's not on the table, oh, my goodness. Turns out this was happening.
You know, Greg, back before Joe Biden had retired and when he was president of the United States, I pointed out that one of the reasons problems got steadily worse, particularly in the early years of this administration, was that it took a great deal of time and effort to convince Joe Biden and the people around him that a problem was real and the problem was getting worse. You'll recall Joe Biden insisted that no serious economist thought that we were headed towards sustained inflation in the months before inflation reached 9.1%. The insistence in the early months that what we were seeing in the surge of migrants at the border was part of a regular seasonal pattern. It was nothing out of the ordinary. And in fact, the number of encounters at the border has been consistently much higher than in previous years for all 3.5 years of the Biden administration. In Afghanistan, the assurance you are not going to see diplomats rushing and evacuated on helicopters just about a month, maybe 6 weeks before we actually saw that happening, right? So we're constantly telling the Biden administration, this is a problem. And Joe Biden is constantly telling us, no, this is not a problem. And by the time the Biden recognizes this is a problem, everything has gotten much worse and U.S. options are greatly limited. Well, for the better part of 3 years, we have looked at the sordid employment history of Hunter Biden and said, yeah, this is influence peddling. This is corruption. This is cashing in on your dad's name. This is every sleazy businessman from Russia to Ukraine to Asia to China, Romania. They're buying friendships with Hunter Biden with the hopes of influencing and changing U.S. policies. And because the other, why would these people be working with Hunter Biden otherwise? I don't believe for a moment Joe Biden's assertion that his son Hunter is the smartest person he knows. But even if he was, I would point out, this is a time period where Hunter Biden wrote in his own autobiography that he was smoking crack every 15 minutes. So why would they be paying massive amounts of money to a guy smoking crack all the time? What value does Hunter Biden bring to the table? And the only thing is his last name and his connection to his father and his ability to put his dad on the phone with these people. And I recall, I believe it was Devin Archer who said that, no, this is not actually, it was the illusion of influence peddling. Hey, you know what? When you can get the vice president on the phone, that is influence. That's not an illusion of influence. That's actual influence. Whether or not Biden does what he's supposed to do. You and I can't get Joe Biden on the phone. Heck, based on our early conversation in this podcast, I'm not sure Kamala Harris can get Joe Biden on the phone. So now it can be told, now that Joe Biden, so the entire, remember, for the last 3 years, the dominant message, not from every corner of the mainstream media, but a significant portion of them has been, Jim, this is a story of a father's love for his son. BS. This is a story of an absolute crackhead guy who attempted to deduct the cost of prostitutes on his taxes as a business expense. That's the kind of moral character we're dealing with here. It's not just the banging the prostitutes thing. It's the trying to that's the extra cojones right there. This is who we're dealing with. There's never been any reason to think, wow, this is just a sad story of a very relatable story of someone struggling. No, this is someone who has made the wrong choice every single possible time. It's very hard to believe he did not run afoul of the law. Oh, by the way, he didn't pay his taxes. And oh, by the way, he lied on his gun application. So where do we get our "you were right all along" prize? Because I feel like I'd have a whole bunch of them on everything from lab leak to everything else. Like, oh, Joe Biden isn't senile and age isn't impeding with his ability to, like, where are our prizes for that? Right? Why is there no recognition? All of a sudden, like, the conservatives get demonstrated to be right on something, and there's just kind of this attitude most of them, oh, that's funny, oh well. And then the short attention span theater kicks in, and we just forget and we move on to the next one. Well, like Kamala Harris is a centrist, Greg.
Yeah, the gaslighting is amazing here. It's kind of the old, beyond the fact that Biden's no longer a political liability, potentially. We want to let the facts of the case play out. And then once the report comes back and people ask questions about the report, that's old news. Why are we still talking about this?
Go figure. It was a crook all along. Oh, well. Well, don't you feel bad for defending this crook for the past 3.5 years? Don't everybody else who wanted to get the crook and you were trying to block their way from chasing after it? No? Okay. Yeah. So just price of doing business. What you got to do if you're a Democrat.
The gaslighting on 3 different martinis today, from rewriting headlines, which were already pretty darn sympathetic, to reinventing Kamala from start to finish, to Hunter Biden. Yeah, a lot of that stuff you said he was doing. Yeah, he was doing it.
Picture Greg and I drinking our martinis in a slightly different bar. The bartender behind the bar, named Tim, punchy guy from Minnesota, it's like, look at the gaslight. Look at the gaslight. It's not getting dimmer in here. It's getting brighter.
And he keeps telling us to mind our own business for some reason, but that's not going to happen. Jim, have a great day. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Wednesday and join us again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.